My name is Amelia, and I'm 34 years old. A week before my sister's destination wedding, my accountant discovered my mother secretly stole my $500K trust fund 14 years ago. I looked at my mother at the welcome dinner in Tuscany. She didn't flinch, she didn't apologize, she just smiled. And then she repeated the lie that had ruined my 20s. You were too irresponsible for real money. I'd spent 14 years freezing in a basement, believing my loving father thought I was completely worthless. Turns out it wasn't my dad, it was my mom, a forged signature, and her pure greed. What I pulled out of my purse that night made her smile disappear forever. But I'll get to that. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. Let me take you back 14 years ago, to the darkest winter of my life. I was 20 years old, standing in the dusty, suffocating living room of our family home. My father, George, had just passed away from a sudden heart attack. The house smelled like stale lilies and cold coffee from the funeral. I was completely broken. My father was my rock, the only person who truly saw me. My mother, Delilah, had a different view of our family. There was Bailey, my younger sister, who was 18 at the time, and then there was me. Bailey got designer grief therapy, a brand new silver sports car to ease her pain, and an all-expenses-paid trip to Paris. I got a cold, hard stare from across the kitchen table. Delilah held a stack of legal papers in her manicured hands. I didn't argue when she called me to sit down. I just waited. She looked at me with eyes as cold as winter ice and delivered the lie that would ruin my 20s. Your father left you absolutely nothing, Amelia, she said, her voice completely flat. He knew you were too irresponsible to handle real money. Everything goes to Bailey's future and my savings. She said it like she was reading a grocery list. The thing is, I almost believed her. Delilah had spent my whole life calling me a scatterbrained mess. She would tell relatives at family dinners, Bailey is our shining star. Amelia is just floating, like I was a piece of useless trash in the wind. November 2012. Every single day I woke up with a heavy stone of panic in my stomach. Because I had zero safety net, I had to take 3 grueling jobs just to survive. I was a late-night gas station clerk mopping sticky floors for $7.50 an hour. I woke up at 5 a.m. to be a dog walker in the freezing snow. On weekends, I stared at a blinding computer screen doing data entry until my eyes burned. My mother lived in a 4-bedroom house and never offered me a dime. One evening, my heater broke in my cheap, moldy basement apartment. I was shivering so hard my teeth rattled. I swallowed my pride, walked in the freezing rain to my mother's house and asked her point blank, Mom, can you please lend me $200 for a space heater? I am freezing. She barely looked up from her glossy travel magazine. I'm sorry, Amelia, money is tight. You need to learn how to budget better. I walked back to my freezing basement and cried until my ribs hurt. She didn't call to check on me. The next morning, I saw Bailey post a photo online of a new $2,000 designer handbag my mom had just bought her as a random gift. While I was freezing, my mother was funding Bailey's luxury life. I told myself I just needed to work harder. I told myself my father would want me to be strong. And for a while I kept telling myself that until I was completely numb. I didn't fight her. I believed I was unworthy. Let me compress 14 years into what they actually felt like, carrying a mountain of bricks on your back while watching someone else ride in a limousine. I worked those 3 jobs for 6 brutal years. I saved every single penny. I taught myself business management through free library books. Because nobody told me I couldn't, I started a small organic catering company in my tiny kitchen. By 28, I had my own commercial kitchen. By 30, I had a fleet of delivery vans. By 34, I was the CEO of a highly successful event catering business, making 6 figures. I bought a beautiful, cozy home with a large garden. I paid every bill with my own blood, sweat, and tears. And every single time I hit a milestone, my mother found a way to poison it. That's nice you cook for people, Amelia, she would say, sipping her expensive wine. But Bailey just hit 10,000 followers on her lifestyle blog. She has real influence. Isn't that amazing? Your little food business is cute, but Bailey is a brand. It wasn't that she slapped me in the face. She just made sure I knew the rules of her twisted game. And in her game, Bailey was always the winner. Not because Bailey actually worked for it. She barely lifted a finger. But because my mother funded her entire existence. I didn't hate Bailey. She was my sister, kept totally blind to the truth by our mother. What I hated was myself. I hated that I believed my loving father thought I was worthless. That belief was a dark shadow over my heart for 14 years. But I survived because of the deep love I had for my late grandmother Mildred, and her sister, my great-aunt Penelope. Grandmother Mildred had always told me I had a heart of gold before she passed away. Great-aunt Penelope, who lived overseas in London, was the only one who still called me to remind me of my worth. She knew the real me, and she knew a secret that was about to blow my mother's perfect world into a million pieces. 10 months before the wedding, everything started to unravel. Bailey called me on a sunny Tuesday in August. She was screaming with excitement so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. She was engaged to Julian, the wealthy heir to a chain of European boutique hotels, and they weren't just having a wedding, they were having a lavish $1 million destination wedding in Tuscany, Italy. "Leah, it's going to be a fairy tale," Bailey squealed. Then came the catch. "Mom said since you own that little food business, you wouldn't mind baking 500 gourmet cupcakes for the engagement party for free. It'll be great exposure for you." I gripped the kitchen counter, the smell of fresh basil and vanilla around me suddenly making me feel sick. Free labor. That was my role. I said yes because I loved Bailey, and because I was used to giving until I was empty. The very next morning, Delilah called. She didn't call to ask how my business was doing. She called to give orders as the grand director of the Italy trip. "Amelia, about your dress for the wedding," my mother said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I've picked out a dull, plain gray dress for you. I don't want you wearing anything flashy. Julian's family is very high society. We need you to just blend into the background. We don't want them thinking our family is just working class." I hung up the phone and stood in my commercial kitchen, chopping vegetables with a knife that suddenly felt very heavy. I was 34 years old. I was the CEO of a catering empire. I managed a huge team and balanced massive budgets, yet my mother still treated me like a dirty peasant who needed to hide in the shadows. But the real heartbreak didn't happen in my kitchen. It happened in my accountant's office. Every year I sat down with Mr. Vance, a kind older man who handled my business taxes. We were going over my files when he stopped. The sharp clicking of his keyboard suddenly paused. He frowned at the screen, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Amelia," he said slowly, "did you ever pay off the tax penalty on the $500,000 trust fund withdrawal from 14 years ago?" The room started spinning. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. "What trust fund?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "My father died 14 years ago and left me nothing. My mother told me I was too irresponsible." Mr. Vance looked at me with deep pity. He turned the screen around. There it was, an old buried tax flag tied to my social security number. 14 years ago, a trust fund set up exclusively in my name by my father had been completely emptied. $500,000, gone. The lie my mother had told me wasn't just cruel, it was a crime. It felt like a match had been struck inside a dark, gas-filled room. For 14 years I had worked myself to the bone, freezing in a damp basement, believing my father thought I was a failure. But he hadn't. He had loved me, he had secured my future, and my mother had stolen it to fund Bailey's luxurious life and her own greed. I didn't cry. I was way past crying. I felt a cold, burning anger. I didn't say a word to my mother. Instead, I quietly hired a ruthless legal forensic auditor. For months, while I smiled and baked cupcakes for Bailey, my auditor dug through bank records, forged signatures, and hidden accounts. He compiled every piece of undeniable proof into a thick manila folder. I locked it in my safe, waiting. A week before the wedding, my great-aunt Penelope called me from London. The connection was crackly, but her voice was as sharp as ever. "Amelia, my brave girl," she said. "I am packing my bags to fly to Italy, but I am bringing more than just a wedding gift." "What do you mean, Aunt Penny?" I asked, my heart beating faster. She took a deep, shaky breath. "I made a promise to your grandmother Mildred before she died. George's memory deserves the truth. Your mother is a monster, Amelia. And in Italy, her mask is going to fall off." She hung up before I could ask anything else. I stood in my living room, feeling the electricity in the air. Penelope knew. She had known all along. I walked to my safe, took out the thick manila folder of forensic audit documents, and slid it into my travel purse. I zipped it shut. I was flying to Tuscany to attend a wedding paid for with my stolen money. But I wasn't going as the quiet, broken girl anymore. I was going as the storm. If you've ever watched someone spend your money while treating you like dirt, let me tell you, it changes your soul. The Italian sun was blinding when my taxi pulled up to the breathtaking 15th century stone villa in Tuscany. It looked like a movie set. Lush green vineyards stretched for miles, but all I could see were dollar signs, my stolen dollar signs. Before I could even drop my bags, my mother marched down the grand cobblestone steps. She was wearing a silk designer pantsuit and a massive diamond necklace I had never seen before. "Amelia, you're late," she snapped, not even saying hello. "The staff will take your bags to the basement annex next to the laundry room. We had to give your actual room to Julian's uncle. You don't mind roughing it, right?" I gripped my travel purse, feeling the heavy manila folder inside. "Fine," I muttered. I didn't care about the dark room, I cared about the reckoning. Instead of resting after my flight, I was immediately shoved into the villa's sweltering, humid kitchen. I spent 4 agonizing hours standing on the hard tile, piping intricate vanilla bean frosting onto 500 cupcakes. My feet throbbed, sweat dripped down my neck. Suddenly, the kitchen doors swung open. It was Delilah, arm in arm with Julian's mother, a terrifyingly wealthy woman named Beatrice who wore sunglasses indoors. "Oh look," Beatrice sneered, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. "Is this the local village baker you hired?" My mother let out a high-pitched, nasty laugh. "Oh no, Beatrice. This is my eldest, Amelia. She has a little cooking hobby. She just loves getting her hands dirty. She's not refined or cultured like our Bailey." I gripped my frosting bag so hard it almost burst. I was the CEO of a highly successful company, and she was introducing me to her new rich friends as the dirty help. But I swallowed my rage. "Just wait," I told myself. "Just wait." An hour later, a sleek black town car pulled into the driveway. Great Aunt Penelope had arrived from London. Even at 78, she looked like a fierce queen, wrapped in a bold red coat and leaning on a heavy silver walking cane. While Delilah was busy kissing up to Julian's relatives, Penelope found me in the dusty hallway near my basement room. She pulled me into the shadows, her sharp blue eyes locking onto mine. "Are you all right, child?" she whispered, her voice rough with emotion. "I'm surviving," I said. "Did you mean what you said on the phone?" Penelope tapped her silver cane on the stone floor. "Show me." I unzipped my purse and pulled out the thick legal folder. I opened it to the first page, the official bank transfer showing exactly $500,000 moving from my father's private trust into a joint account controlled by Delilah, dated 14 years ago. Penelope traced the numbers with a shaking finger. A single tear fell down her wrinkled cheek. "My poor brother," she whispered, speaking of my father George. "He worked his entire life to make sure you were safe. He knew Delilah favored Bailey. He knew she would abandon you." She looked up at me, her face hardening into pure steel. "Tonight is the grand welcome dinner. The entire European hotel family will be there. 200 guests. That is when we strike." The welcome dinner was held outside in the villa's private vineyard. Hundreds of floating fairy lights hung above massive, rustic wooden tables. There were at least 200 guests, laughing, eating, and drinking wildly expensive champagne. Bailey sat at the center of the main table, wearing a glittering gold dress, looking completely clueless. I sat at the very end of the family table, squished between 2 of Julian's distant cousins who completely ignored me. Delilah sat at the head of the table, holding court like an arrogant monarch. Halfway through the meal, the catering staff started rushing around, looking panicked. They were understaffed for the sheer size of the wealthy crowd. Delilah stood up, her eyes scanning the tables until they landed on me. She walked over, her stolen diamond necklace sparkling in the fairy lights. "Amelia," she commanded loudly, making sure the snobby guests around us could hear. "The waiters are falling behind. Go into the kitchen, put on an apron, and help them serve the rest of the roasted lamb. It's the least you can do to earn your keep this weekend." Because you used my stolen money to pay for everyone's flights, I thought, my blood boiling. The music seemed to fade. People at our end of the table stopped talking and stared at me. I looked up at her, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Before I could speak, Great Aunt Penelope, who was sitting across from me, slammed her heavy silver cane against the wooden table. Thwack! "She will do no such thing, Delilah," Penelope's voice echoed sharply into the night air. The sound of Great Aunt Penelope's heavy silver cane hitting the wood echoed across the entire vineyard. For a second, the only sound in the night was the chirp of the crickets. Delilah's face turned completely pale. "Penelope, please sit down, you're embarrassing us in front of Julian's family," she hissed. Her voice sounded like an angry, venomous snake. "The only one who should be embarrassed is you, Delilah," Penelope fired back. She didn't sit down. Instead, my 78-year-old great-aunt pushed past the waiters and walked straight to the small wooden stage set up for speeches. She grabbed the microphone from its tall iron stand. A loud screeching sound echoed through the speakers, making everyone cover their ears. 200 incredibly wealthy guests stopped eating. Julian's mother, Beatrice, lowered her designer sunglasses. Bailey looked totally confused, dropping her silver fork onto her fancy glass plate with a loud clink. "Excuse me, everyone, I have a toast to make," Penelope announced. Her voice shook, but not from old age or fear. It shook from 14 years of built-up fury. She looked right at my mother, who was now clutching her diamond necklace in panic. "It is so generous of Amelia to fund this lavish $1 million wedding," Penelope said into the microphone, every word slicing through the cold night air like a sharp sword. "Especially since it was paid for with the $500,000 trust fund her father left only for her." The entire vineyard went completely, terrifyingly silent. It was the kind of silence where you can hear people stop breathing. You could have heard a pin drop on the soft grass. Bailey gasped out loud, covering her mouth with both trembling hands. Her wide eyes darted from Penelope standing on the stage to our mother sitting at the head table. I slowly turned my head to look at Delilah. I expected her to scream, or cry, or run away in shame, but she didn't. My mother didn't even flinch. She simply leaned back in her expensive wooden chair, took a slow, calm sip of her dark red wine, and leaned close to my face. Her breath smelled like sour grapes and mint. "Don't look so shocked," she whispered directly into my ear, her voice cold and dead. "You always were too irresponsible to handle real money anyway. I did this family a favor." Those words hit my chest like a speeding train. 14 years. I had worked until my hands literally bled. I had frozen in the winter. I had skipped meals so I could pay my heating bill, all while my mother stole my safety net to buy herself diamonds and Bailey sports cars. She wasn't just a thief, she was proud of her crime. But I wasn't the scared 20-year-old girl crying in a basement anymore. The fear that had held my heart hostage suddenly shattered into a million tiny pieces. "You didn't do anyone a favor," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady as a rock. "You committed a felony." I reached down and grabbed my travel purse. My hands weren't shaking at all. I unzipped the bag and pulled out the thick, heavy manila folder containing the legal forensic audit. I slammed the heavy stack of papers right onto the dinner table, knocking over my mother's wine glass. The red wine spilled everywhere, looking like dark blood soaking into the pure white tablecloth. "What is this trash?" Delilah snapped, quickly pulling her silk pantsuit away from the nasty stain. "That is a legal forensic audit," I said clearly, making sure the wealthy guests at the next table could hear me. "It holds every forged signature, every secret bank transfer, and every fake tax return you filed to drain my father's trust fund. $500,000, Mom." Before my mother could say another word, Julian's father, Lord Reginald, stood up. He was a very tall, intimidating man who owned half the luxury hotels in Europe. He did not look happy. His family hated scandals more than anything in the world. "Delilah," Lord Reginald's deep, booming voice echoed across the silent vineyard. "Is this true? Have you used stolen money to pay for my son's wedding?" Lord Reginald's question hung in the air like a heavy storm cloud. The entire wedding party stared at Delilah. For a split second, my mother looked like a cornered animal. But Delilah was a master actress. She quickly blinked her eyes, forcing fake tears to spill down her cheeks. "Reginald, please, you must understand," Delilah cried out, pressing her hand to her chest. She launched into a desperate, sobbing speech to save her reputation. "I was a grieving widow. George left me with nothing but hidden debts when he died. I had to make incredibly hard choices. I was just trying to protect my family's future, to make sure Bailey had a decent life. This money was owed to us, but the wealthy European family wasn't buying her cheap performance." Beatrice, Julian's terrifying mother, pushed her chair back violently. The legs scraped loudly against the stone patio. She marched straight over to our table, her designer heels clicking sharply. Without asking, she snatched the heavy manila folder right off the table. "Let's see what choices you made, Delilah," Beatrice sneered. She pulled a gold pair of reading glasses from her purse and opened the audit. She didn't whisper. She read the official bank statements out loud for the entire vineyard to hear. "Transfer of $100,000 on December 1st, Beatrice read, her voice dripping with disgust. "Used to purchase a luxury condo in Paris. Oh, and here is a forged signature from February. Funds used to buy a solid gold Cartier watch and a brand new silver sports car. You didn't pay debts, Delilah. You robbed this poor girl blind to fund a life you couldn't afford." Hearing my agonizing, 14-year nightmare read out loud like a grocery list made my stomach twist. The hot, suffocating feeling of panic rose in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I pushed my chair back and ran away from the glowing fairy lights. I practically sprinted out into the dark rows of grapevines at the edge of the property. I stood there in the chilly Italian night, hiding in the dark shadows. The sweet smell of ripe grapes made me feel sick. I wrapped my arms around myself, shaking. I wanted to call a taxi. I wanted to drive to the airport, fly back home, and hide in my kitchen forever. I was so close to leaving. If I left, my mother would just spin a new lie. But the pain was too much. Then I heard the slow crunch of gravel behind me. It was Great Aunt Penelope, leaning heavily on her silver cane. She didn't yell or scold me. She reached into her deep coat pocket and pulled out a small, wrinkled object. She gently placed it in my trembling hands. It was an old, faded photograph. It was a picture of my dad, George, holding me on his shoulders when I was 5 years old. We were both laughing. A warm tear slipped down my frozen cheek. "There is one more thing you need to know, Amelia," Penelope whispered, her voice full of sorrow. "Your father didn't just set up that trust fund to protect you. He set it up because he found out Delilah was secretly embezzling money from his small hardware store." I looked up, my eyes wide with shock. "What?" "Yes," Penelope nodded slowly. "The week he died from his heart attack, George had already met with a lawyer. He was going to file for a divorce, take you away with him, and hand the police a thick file of evidence against her. Delilah knew he was going to leave her with nothing. His heart gave out before he could save you. She stole your money because it was her last act of revenge against him." The earth seemed to stop spinning. My dad didn't leave me alone. He had been fighting for me until his very last breath. My mother's betrayal wasn't just about money, it was about punishing my father through me. I looked down at the smiling face of my dad in the photograph. Suddenly, the urge to run away completely vanished. A powerful, burning fire lit up inside my soul. I carefully folded the photograph and tucked it safely into my pocket. "Let's go back," I said to Penelope, my voice hard and fearless. "I'm not hiding anymore." I walked back into the bright light of the reception area. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I marched straight up to the head table, where Delilah was now sitting in total, humiliated silence. As I stopped right in front of her, my mother was gripping the edge of the wooden table so hard her knuckles were bone white. She didn't look at me like a mother. She looked at me like a trapped spider. "Amelia, lower your voice," she hissed through her perfectly whitened teeth. She tried to use her old trick, twisting the truth to make herself the victim. "You didn't know George like I did. He was unstable. He was going to leave us with nothing. I took that money to save us from his crazy ideas." The old me would have believed her. The old me would have felt guilty, but the old me was gone. "Do not say his name," I said. My voice wasn't a scream, it was a low, dangerous growl. "He was going to divorce you because you were stealing from his hardware store. He had the lawyer's papers ready. You stole my future out of pure bitter revenge." The wealthy guests gasped again. My mother's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her thick layer of expensive makeup suddenly looked like a cracking porcelain mask. Then a new voice cut through the heavy air. "Mom, tell me she's lying." It was Bailey. My little sister stood up slowly. Her glittering gold dress suddenly looked wrong on her, like a shiny costume she didn't want to wear anymore. Delilah turned to her golden child, her eyes wide with fake panic. "Sweetheart, everything I did for you. Your car, your beautiful apartment, this incredible wedding. I gave you the world." Bailey's face crumbled in horror. She looked down at her hands. She was wearing a thick, diamond-studded bracelet our mother had given her as a wedding gift that very morning. With shaking fingers, Bailey unclasped the heavy diamond jewelry. "I am wearing my sister's stolen life," Bailey whispered, her voice breaking into a painful sob. She threw the heavy diamond bracelet onto the table. It hit Delilah's empty wine glass with a sharp crack. "I don't want any of it. You turned me into a thief without me even knowing." Delilah reached out for her, begging, "Bailey, please, don't do this to me. I am your mother." But Bailey stepped back, moving closer to Julian, who quickly wrapped a protective arm around her shaking shoulders. My mother had officially lost her prized trophy. Delilah turned back to me, her eyes filled with pure hate. "You planned this. You came to Italy just to ruin your sister's special weekend and destroy my good name." I didn't reach into my purse for a college acceptance letter to prove my worth, like I once might have. Instead, I looked her dead in the eye and delivered the final blow. "I didn't come here to ruin a party," I said calmly. "I came here to deliver a message." 2 days ago, before I got on my flight, I went to the police station back home. Delilah froze. The color drained from her face completely. "I handed over the entire forensic audit to a grand jury detective," I continued, my voice ringing out clearly in the night. "They have already frozen all of your bank accounts, and when your plane lands back home, there will be officers waiting to arrest you for felony embezzlement and wire fraud." A collective murmur of deep shock rippled through the 200 guests. The wealthy European family looked utterly disgusted by her crimes. Lord Reginald stood up fully. He buttoned his highly tailored suit jacket with firm precision. He looked at Delilah as if she were a piece of dirty trash on his shoe. "This family does not associate with common criminals," Lord Reginald boomed with total authority. "The wedding between Julian and Bailey may proceed tomorrow, but we will not allow a thief to taint it. Delilah, you are no longer welcome on my property. My private security team will escort you to a cheap motel near the airport immediately." "Beatrice," Julian's mother snapped her fingers at the catering staff. "Clear this woman's plate. She is finished eating here." I watched as two large, serious-looking security guards in black suits stepped out of the shadows. They walked directly toward my mother. I stood there as the security guards asked her to stand up. I felt a strange, rushing sensation in my chest. I thought I would feel angry, or maybe even sad. But all I felt was incredibly light. The dark shadow that had followed me since I was 20 years old was finally lifting. My father's memory was clean. My own worth was no longer tied to her cruel words. I was the CEO of my own life, and she was just a woman being escorted out of a party she tried to steal. 14 years of carrying a mountain of bricks on my back. 14 years of believing I was useless. 14 years of my mother sitting on a throne built with my stolen money. And in just 10 minutes, under the Tuscan stars, her entire castle of lies crumbled into cheap, worthless dust. The two large security guards stepped forward, their shadows falling over my mother. I expected her to try and talk her way out of it again, but she lost her mind. Instead of picking up her clutch to leave with dignity, Delilah physically resisted the security guards, thrashing around like a feral cat. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, her perfectly styled hair falling into her face. Her expensive diamond necklace got violently tangled in her silk collar as she fought them. But the guards were huge. They simply grabbed her by her silk arms and began dragging her away from the glowing tables. Her designer heels dug into the dirt, scraping loudly across the gravel path. I watched her go. I didn't feel sorry for her. With Delilah gone, the smell of her overpowering, expensive perfume faded into the cool night air. The party music had completely stopped. There was nothing but total, respectful silence from the 200 guests. Waiters were already silently clearing away her spilled wine and the broken glass, erasing her from the table like she was never there. Bailey slowly turned to me. Her mascara was running down her face in thick black lines. She reached down and angrily ripped the bottom hem of her glittering gold dress, as if she couldn't stand wearing it anymore. "Amelia," Bailey choked out, her voice trembling. "I was shopping for designer bags while you were freezing in a basement. I was living a fairy tale funded by your stolen money." I reached out and pulled my little sister into a tight hug. She buried her face in my shoulder, ruining her makeup even more, crying heavy, guilt-filled tears. "You were a child manipulated by a master," I whispered to her. "You didn't know. The truth is like a nasty surgery. It hurts, but it saves your life. We are both free now." Bailey pulled back and sniffed. "I thought I was her favorite," she said brokenly, "but I was just her alibi." She reached into her small purse and pulled out a shiny set of keys. It was the keys to the brand new silver sports car Delilah had bought her. She grabbed my hand and pressed the cold metal keys right into my palm. "Take it," Bailey pleaded. "Sell it, burn it, I don't care. I absolutely refuse to keep a single thing bought with your stolen money." I closed my fingers over the keys. I didn't need the car, but I accepted the sentiment because she needed to give it to me. Julian, who had been watching in stunned silence, stepped forward. He didn't look angry at Bailey. He looked incredibly proud of her. He handed Bailey a soft white handkerchief and wrapped his arms fiercely around her waist. He looked at me with deep respect. "You are the strongest woman I have ever met, Amelia," Julian said quietly. Then an unexpected shadow fell over our table. It was Lord Reginald. The terrifying hotel billionaire bowed his head slightly to me, apologizing for his earlier judgment. "Amelia, I owe you a sincere apology," Lord Reginald said, his deep voice softer now. "I allowed your mother to make me believe you were just uneducated, working-class help. But you are a brilliant survivor. I hear you run a highly successful catering empire." I nodded, standing tall. "I am the CEO, yes. When this wedding is over, I want you to fly to London and meet with my board," Reginald offered smoothly. "I want to offer your company a massive, multi-million-dollar catering contract for all our European hotels." My jaw almost dropped. The throbbing pain in my feet from baking cupcakes suddenly vanished, replaced by a pure rush of adrenaline. I looked the billionaire in the eye. I will have my accountant look over the terms, Lord Reginald. Thank you. Even Beatrice, Julian's snobby mother, seemed impressed by my spine. She walked over and personally handed me a crystal flute of vintage champagne. Penelope, leaning on her silver cane, tapped the ground twice to signal that the war was finally over. She looked at Bailey, whose eyes were red and swollen. "Bailey, child," Penelope said gently, "when the police arrest your mother tomorrow, the news will be a circus back home. You and Julian should come live with me in London for a few months. Escape the fallout." Bailey nodded gratefully, blowing her nose into the handkerchief. "Yes, Aunt Penny. We will go to London after the honeymoon." I stood in the middle of the Italian vineyard, holding my glass of champagne. I felt a heavy, bittersweet weight of grief for the true sisterhood Bailey and I had missed out on for 14 years. But looking at her now, I knew we were finally going to be okay. I realized that the missing $500,000 didn't matter half as much as finally getting my dad's truth out into the light. I didn't need the money to be successful. I had built myself from the ground up. In the distance, I heard the faint screeching of taxi tires. It was my mother, being hauled away to a cheap, dirty motel alone. I didn't tell her I would see her in September. I knew the next time I saw my mother, it would be across a cold courtroom. I took a slow sip of my champagne and looked up at the stars, looking forward to tomorrow's wedding day without the dark cloud of Delilah hovering over us. After the chaos settled, Penelope asked me to walk with her to a quiet stone balcony overlooking the vineyards. The cool midnight breeze carried the sweet scent of lavender, calming my racing heart. "Amelia," Penelope said softly, leaning against the stone railing, "there is a reason Delilah hated your father so much toward the end. It wasn't just about the hardware store money." I looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Penelope sighed. "Your father, George, had a beautiful dream. He wanted to use the profits from his store to open a free community kitchen for the homeless in our town. He wanted to feed people who had nothing." I gasped softly. That was exactly what my catering business did on the holidays. "Delilah hated the idea," Penelope continued, her voice filled with disgust. "She called it a peasant's dream. She thought charity was a disease that would ruin her social status. She embezzled the money to stop him from building the kitchen, and to keep all the wealth for herself. She wanted diamonds. He wanted to give away bread." My eyes filled with fresh tears. My entire food business, my love for cooking and feeding people, was the exact dream my dad had been fighting for. Without even knowing it, I had brought his dream to life. I reached into my pocket and touched the faded photo of my dad, feeling a deep, powerful connection to him. I walked back down to the patio and found Bailey standing near a crackling outdoor fire pit. She was holding the $2,000 designer handbag Delilah had bought her the day my heater broke. "Bailey," I asked gently. She looked at me, her face glowing in the firelight. "I am burning the past," she said fiercely. With a strong throw, Bailey tossed the expensive bag straight into the hot flames. We stood there side by side, watching the expensive leather bubble and melt. The smell of melting leather and burning greed filled the air, but to me, it smelled like freedom. Instead of getting into my car and driving away alone, I sat down by the fire pit and pulled out my phone. I called Marcus, the loyal head chef of my catering company back home. "Amelia, how is Italy?" Marcus answered happily. "Marcus," I said, smiling through my tears, "start looking for new staff. We are expanding to Europe. Lord Reginald just offered us a multi-million-dollar contract." Marcus screamed with joy over the phone, crying happy tears. "We did it, boss. We really did it." The next morning arrived bright and beautiful. It was a golden Tuscan morning, with clear blue skies and birds singing. There were no angry texts from Delilah. There was no family gossip. In fact, we received word from local authorities that Delilah was legally barred from contacting us as the fraud investigation began. She was gone. The wedding was going to be completely different now. Bailey decided to wear a simple, elegant white silk gown instead of the flashy dresses our mother had forced on her. While she was getting her hair done, she turned to me. "Leah," she whispered, using my childhood nickname, "will you walk me down the aisle? You were more of a parent to me than she ever was." My heart completely melted. It would be the greatest honor of my life, Bales. At noon, the guests gathered in the sunny garden. A live string quartet began playing a soft, beautiful Italian love song. I linked my arm through Bailey's. Together, we began walking down a long carpet of soft white rose petals. As we walked, my chest felt as light as a feather. I didn't feel broken anymore. I honestly felt like my father was walking right beside us, holding both of our hands. When we reached the altar, Julian was wiping tears from his eyes. He looked at Bailey like she was the most precious thing in the world. The officiant spoke beautifully about finding light after a long period of darkness. It felt like he was talking directly to our family. I kissed Bailey softly on the cheek before handing her hand to Julian. I stepped back and watched my little sister get married. There was pure, unclouded joy in the air. For the first time in 14 years, the dark shadow that hung over us melted into the warm Italian sun. During the reception, Penelope sat happily at a table, her heavy silver cane finally resting peacefully against her chair. She had fought her battle, and she had won. I realized I didn't need a single apology from my mother to heal. She couldn't hurt me anymore. I made a silent promise to myself right there. I was going to use the profits from my new European contract to open the George Fletcher Community Kitchen back home. I raised my glass of sparkling water toward the bright blue sky. "We won, Dad," I whispered into the breeze. The joyful clinking of glasses echoed around me, and I couldn't wait to see what my beautiful new life was going to look like. 2 weeks later, my plane touched down back home. I wasn't returning as the broken, tired woman who had left. I was returning with a fierce, unstoppable purpose. Instead of going home to rest, I drove straight to the poorest side of our town. I parked in front of an abandoned, run-down brick building with boarded-up windows. Above the door, a faded, dusty sign still barely read, "Fletcher's Hardware." It was my dad's old store. It smelled like old sawdust and sweet childhood memories. Standing right there on the hood of my car, I signed the real estate deed to officially buy the building back. The next morning, I drove to the downtown police precinct to meet with Detective Hayes. She was a stern, no-nonsense woman who slid a thick legal file across her metal desk. "Your mother's entire life was built on a house of cards," Detective Hayes explained gently. "She is currently sitting in a county jail cell, completely unable to post bail." I looked at the documents. The police had seized all of Delilah's stolen assets, the cars, the jewelry, the house, to repay the estate. She had absolutely nothing left, not a single dime, and no rich friends to save her. "Does she want me to visit her?" I asked quietly. Detective Hayes shook her head. "She hasn't asked for anyone except a high-priced lawyer she can no longer afford." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of total closure. I refused to visit her. My mother had made her choices, and now she was sitting in the dark cage she built for herself. When I got back to my house, I opened my laptop for a video call with Bailey. When her face popped up on the screen, I gasped. She was sitting in a tiny, cozy flat in London, but the biggest shock was her outfit. Bailey was wearing a flower-covered apron, her hair tied back in a messy bun. "Look at you," I laughed. "What happened to the designer clothes?" Bailey grinned, wiping flour off her cheek. "I got a job as a beginner pastry chef at a local London bakery. I burned the first 3 batches of croissants today, but Leah, I paid for the flour with my own hard-earned money." I cried happy tears watching her. My sister was finally learning the value of hard work, and she looked genuinely, truly happy. In the background of the video, Great Aunt Penelope walked by with a cup of tea, giving the camera a cheeky thumbs up. They were safe. Over the next 3 months, my life became a beautiful whirlwind. I took the first payment from Lord Reginald's multi-million-dollar European contract and poured it directly into renovating the old hardware store. Marcus and my entire catering team worked day and night, painting the old brick walls a bright, cheerful yellow. We installed massive commercial ovens and long-serving counters. Finally, we hung a huge, beautiful wooden sign above the door that read, "The George Fletcher Community Kitchen." Our grand opening was on Thanksgiving morning. By 10 a.m., the incredible smell of roasted turkey, fresh herbs, and warm bread filled the freezing city streets. When I opened the front doors, my breath hitched. There was a line of 200 hungry, shivering people wrapping all the way around the block. I tied on my apron and got to work. For 6 hours, I personally handed out piping hot meals on silver serving trays. I didn't stop moving. At one point, an elderly homeless man took a plate of hot food from me, his eyes filling with tears as he thanked me profusely. I looked around the packed, noisy, joyful room. I knew deep in my soul that this was exactly what my father had dreamed of. My mother had tried to destroy this dream out of greed, but she had failed. This kitchen was a fortress of love, built right on top of the ruins of her terrible lie. My feet ached terribly from standing all day, but my heart was soaring with a bright, fiery purpose. As we were cleaning up that evening, a delivery driver walked in holding a massive, gorgeous bouquet of bright yellow sunflowers. The card was from London. I opened it and read Bailey's handwriting. "Dad would be so proud of you," And I am too. Love, Bales. Later that night, I sat on the back porch of the new kitchen, holding a warm mug of hot apple cider. The first soft, white snowflakes of winter began to fall gently from the sky. I didn't feel cold. I felt like the wealthiest woman in the entire world, not in money, but in spirit and truth. My mother's dark shadow was completely gone. No letters, no texts, no power over me anymore. The deep wound she gave me didn't just close, it had transformed into a bright source of light for hundreds of people. And the best part was, my beautiful hard-earned life was only just beginning. 3 months after the kitchen opened, I found myself sitting on a hard wooden bench in a freezing, sterile downtown courtroom. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed loudly overhead, making my skin crawl. My mother, Delilah, was led into the room by an armed guard. She was wearing a bright orange prison jumpsuit, her wrists locked in heavy silver handcuffs. She looked frail, aged, and absolutely terrified. The stern judge banged his heavy wooden gavel against his desk. "Delilah Fletcher," he boomed. "For the crime of grand embezzlement and wire fraud, I sentence you to 7 years in federal prison, without the possibility of early parole." As the guards grabbed her arms, Delilah turned her head. She locked eyes with me across the crowded room, her face completely desperate, silently begging me to save her. But I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel sad either. I just looked at her with a feeling of complete, unbreakable peace. I stood up, turned my back on her, and walked out of the heavy oak doors. I never looked back. I drove straight back to the bustling, warm community kitchen. When I walked into my office, there was a thick brown leather package sitting on my desk. It was a special delivery from Great Aunt Penelope in London. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was my dad's old, worn-out pocket diary. Penelope had included a small note. "I found this hidden inside the lining of your father's old winter coat. Turn to the last page." I carefully flipped through the yellowed, fragile pages until I reached the very last entry, dated the night before he died. The ink was slightly smudged. "My sweet Amelia," his messy handwriting read. "Delilah thinks she can break your spirit. She thinks she can hide my money from you. But she doesn't know that you have a heart of pure, unbreakable gold. You have always been my greatest legacy. Keep fighting, my brave girl. The world needs your light." Hot tears poured down my face, washing away the very last drop of pain inside my soul. I clutched the old leather diary tightly to my chest. My father loved me. He believed in me. He had seen my strength even when I was just a young, struggling girl. Fast forward to Christmas Eve. A massive, howling snowstorm had blanketed the city in thick white snow. The kitchen smelled like sweet cinnamon, roasted ham, and fresh pine needles. We were serving 500 plates of hot food to freezing, hungry families who had nowhere else to go. I was exhausted, wiping sweat from my forehead, when the heavy front doors swung open violently along with a blast of icy wind. I froze. Standing in the doorway, covered from head to toe in white snowflakes, were Bailey and Great Aunt Penelope. Bailey dropped her snowy suitcases, ran across the dining room, and threw her arms around my neck. "You didn't think I'd let you cook Christmas dinner all by yourself, did you, boss?" Bailey laughed, tears shining in her eyes. She pulled a clean white apron from her bag and immediately tied it around her waist. For the rest of the night, the three of us served food side by side. We laughed, we cried, and we fed hundreds of people. It was the first real, honest family holiday of my entire life. There was no scorecard. There was no golden child and no forgotten daughter. There was just love. Hours later, after the final guest had left and the storm had quieted down, I stood alone in the kitchen. I looked at my reflection in the shiny stainless steel doors of the massive commercial ovens. I realized that I didn't just survive the cold winters of my 20s. I became the fire that kept others warm. My mother tried to bury me under a mountain of lies, but instead of letting it crush me, I used those rocks to build a fortress. I turned a stolen inheritance into a feast for the broken. If you are reading this right now, and you feel like someone has placed a heavy ceiling over your life, if someone has told you that you are worthless, or irresponsible, or unlovable, listen to me carefully. The chains they put on you are just paper chains. They only hold you if you believe in them. You do not need a magical apology from the person who hurt you to start healing. You don't need their money, and you don't need their permission. You just need to gather the broken pieces of your life and use them to build your own kingdom of light. I took a deep, joyful breath of the cinnamon-scented air. My heart was completely, wonderfully full. I turned off the kitchen lights, walked out the front door, and stepped into the beautiful, quiet, snowy night as a truly free woman. Sometimes the darkest winters of our lives give us the exact pieces we need to build our own light. Thank you for staying with me through the storm, and for sitting with the heavy, honest truth of this journey. Sharing a story this raw and intensely personal isn't easy, but knowing it might reach someone who needs to hear it makes every word worth it. If this journey resonated with your own heart, if you've ever had to take back your power and build a fortress out of broken pieces, please leave a like to let me know we share that strength. And if you want to stay connected, I invite you to subscribe. There are so many more deeply human, triumphant stories waiting to be told, and I would be honored to have you here with me for the next one.